Teofimo Lopez and Jamaine Ortiz. Oh my goodness, you guys. Watching that whole fight gave me a headache. And in all honesty, if I just was trying to watch boxing for pleasure, I would have stopped after 30 seconds because that was just torturous to watch that whole fight. Um, I'm a strong believer in garbage in, garbage out. So there's actually an incentive for me not to watch what I consider to be really poor boxing. Because I don't want to somehow subconsciously take that in and then put that out myself when I'm in the ring sparring or fighting. So I think it was probably universally agreed that that was not a great performance by Lopez. Some people felt he actually lost the fight. I'm not going to debate that because in my opinion it's almost irrelevant because his performance was so egregiously bad that I don't care if he wins or loses, but he sure as heck is not going to save boxing with that type of performance. If anything, if that was the fight to save boxing, I'm sorry, but boxing just killed itself. So I'm gonna pick on or gonna identify the four main faults that I saw Teofimo Lopez make, and in sort of specific order. So first error was his footwork was horrendous. So he adopted, I think, identify four different types of footwork / stance that Teofimo used during that fight. So the first one was where he had his left foot, his lead foot was pointing straight forward at his opponent, and his right foot was directly at 3 o'clock, so 90 degrees, pointing straight out to his right. Now, I spoke about this stance a bit when I broke down Callum Smith uses that stance. And it is an appropriate stance for somebody who's long and lean because it's what I call a fencer's stance. You use that back foot turned out, perpendicular to your line of motion, and that gives you the most force going straight forward and then coming straight back, presumably. It's good for that linear in and out motion if that's the type of fighter you are. But that's not really Lopez's style. He's not a long, lean fighter. He's not going to just step in, tag, and retreat quickly. So I'm not sure why he adopted that stance. And the thing is, he did do that sometimes, kind of go forward a little bit and try to draw Ortiz into punching back at him, but that didn't really work because Ortiz was not taking the bait. So the second thing that Lopez did that was really not helpful to him was do the walking motion, where literally instead of staying in that traditional boxing stance and doing the step shuffle or step drag, he just literally walked like one foot in front of the other, like you go walking down the street, and he did that kind of following Ortiz around the ring. You can do that sometimes, but you have to also mix that up. So Mike Tyson did that type of stepping motion, and the advantages of doing that is that you're relaxed. It doesn't take a lot of energy to kind of just do that walking motion, but there has to be a purpose behind it. Like you have to be trying to get to an angle or something, and it just seems to me like Lopez was just doing it just all the time for reasons known mainly to himself. Maybe he felt that it would make him look like a nonchalant and not like he was really trying it hard to get to Ortiz. I'm not sure. But the problem with doing that is there has to be a specific purpose to it, and you have to mix it up with other motions to cut off your opponent once you get within that type of range. You have to either angle off to your left or your right, kind of suddenly to cut off that angle on your opponent, and then fire punches from that position to block them from moving to one side or to the other side. So that was the second footwork error that I saw Teofimo Lopez made. The third footwork error that he made, which was just absolutely egregious, was he crossed his feet over. So let's say he now had his right foot forward, or his left foot forward, and his right foot back in traditional orthodox stance. Sometimes when Ortiz was moving laterally to Ortiz's left, and Teofimo was trying to follow him by moving to Teofimo's right, he would take his lead foot, which is left foot, and cross it over his right foot, and then move his right foot over. And that's exactly wrong. Like, any boxing trainer anywhere on planet Earth will scream and yell at you if you do that, because if you're going to move to your right, you got to move your right foot, even though it's your back foot. You're moving that to your right, and then you're moving your front foot, which is your left foot. You're moving that to your right. Conversely, if you're going to your left side, you move your left foot first and then your right foot. So at no point do your feet ever cross, because you're just way off balance, and that goes for any fighting sport. You know, cross your feet, you're off balance. In judo, we'll sort of do that, but only for an instant as we're turning and pivoting at the same time. So it's not like we're leaving our feet frozen in a crossed position. In any case, so maybe that's the worst part of what Teofimo Lopez footwork errors were. But unfortunately for him, there was one other thing he did was he did that funny little skip backwards motion that he did. It was just nonsensical. Like, maybe he thought it looked cute. I don't know. But overall, yeah, his footwork was terrible, and his stance was either way too narrow, like his feet were crossed, or it was too wide, like when he was in that fencer stance. It was a little bit too wide to be effective, to get in and out fast. And in general, no matter what kind of footwork pattern you adopt, you've got to be able to change it up. You got to be able to change up the rhythm and your steps, because the footwork is part of your art of deception. Okay, so big X number one for Teofimo Lopez was footwork. Big mistake number two was when he did manage to get close enough to Ortiz to touch him, he should have been firing on all cylinders with combinations, because there was so little time where they were actually engaged, right? But Teofimo fired plenty of one-punch combinations, and I'm guessing he's looking for that one big massive power counter. Not sure what their game plan was, because it didn't look clear to me. Like, I couldn't figure out what their game plan was. It's probably why I got a headache, because I'm trying too hard to make, as my trainers would say, make sense out of nonsense. It's pointless to try to analyze beyond just making observations. So that's error number two, is when you did get within firing range, you didn't fire enough combinations, you didn't vary it up enough to be deceptive, or to get a rally going, or to set up the next set of combinations. Third thing, and maybe the most obvious thing, because this was super obvious, it was he kept his hands down way too much, like all the time. And it's okay to drop your hands and move around the ring. It's okay to have your hands down occasionally, but it's not okay to fight the whole fight with your hands down at your side and just kind of walk around or move around the ring. Again, I didn't understand the purpose of that. And that's another factor, that if you were to do that in a sparring session, at Gleason's gym, again, any one of the trainers would have chewed you out, no matter what their sort of fight style or fight school is or was. They would have, you would have gotten chewed out for doing that. I know for sure my former trainer Lennox Blackmore would have first, he would have jumped in the ring and had some choice words for you, and then if you still didn't listen and still kept your hands down for like into the next round, he would have just kicked you out of the ring. He'd be like, you're done, get out. Like, he would have picked the ropes up and just yelled at you until you actually exited the ring, and then, you know, kind of apologized to your sparring partner because, you know, they got all warmed up and sweaty and put all their gear on, and now, you know, you're calling it quits because your fighter's not listening to you. But that's how it at least used to be done. So yeah, that one I really couldn't figure out, because the only reason to drop your hands like that is, you know, maybe you can drop your lead hand from time to time if you're going to fire an up jab. But again, it's not something you're going to do 100% of the fight, or even 95%. So that leads me to the next big error, and they're kind of one and the same, which is there was no guard. There was no clear guard he was using for defense, whether it was, you know, the double arm high guard, cross guard, shell guard, and it looked like he was making motions towards doing sort of a cross arm guard, but he never really did it. And if you're going to use that type of guard, you got to be kind of crunched down and you've got to be in motion. All guards are dynamic. You're never supposed to just put your arms in a position and stand still, or just walk forward without moving your head. But there was no guard per se. It was just like, I'm gonna pretend to imitate a guard at best with Teofimo, and that's also a little bit doesn't make sense, because you're fighting somebody who's moving around. You've got to get to them. In order to get to them, you need to use your feet, and you got to have some type of guard, and you need to move your head and be deceptive on your way in, be willing to take a shot or two, and then impose your will on them when you get to the distance where you're comfortable touching them up. So I guess that's the biggest mystery to me, is I couldn't, or the most frustrating part of watching that fight was I could not follow any sort of logic behind what Lopez was trying to do. Like, I still can't tell you what his game plan was. I can guess that maybe he thought, oh, I'm just gonna wait for this kid to punch at me, and I'm gonna evade him and come back with a hard counter and make him look goofy. And maybe this walking around with his hands down thing was like a showboating thing, trying to say, you're so ineffective, I can just keep my hands down, and it doesn't matter. Except it does matter, because now you look like you don't know what you're doing, and you didn't get off your punches because your hands aren't in a position to punch, and they're not in a position to defend, so you can get to position to punch. So I don't know. I mean, it makes me wonder how much sparring Lopez did in his training camp, number one. Number two, it makes me wonder who's he listening to now. Like, if any trainer saw any one of those four things in sparring, that should have been like immediately, like, you would chastise a beginner fighter for doing that, for crossing their feet, for keeping their hands down like that, for not adopting a guard. Like, just pick a guard and use that. You know, tomorrow we can try a different one if you want. But yeah, just no logic, and it wasn't even worthy of a sparring session, because like I said, if anybody dare get in the ring and start sparring like that, I mean, most trainers would just stop it, because they don't want their fighter practicing bad habits for 8 rounds, like 10, 12 rounds, whatever. There's no point in reinforcing really, really egregiously bad habits. And for the people who don't really know boxing out there, no, this has nothing to do with style. Those 4 points I've just brought out are all just about fundamentals. Now, okay, you can say, well, you know, Floyd Mayweather did this, Roy Jones did that, Pernell Whitaker did that. Yeah, okay, Pernell and Roy Jones were so remarkable that they could occasionally drop their hands, and they used upper body movement to overcompensate for the fact that they had their hands down, right, and didn't have a guard. They're incredibly athletic and had incredibly sharp eyes and so much experience that it's like, if you're going to do that, you have to know what that other person's going to do so you can move your body to move your head out of the way of that punch that you happen to know is coming. But you don't get to that point without having your hands up first and figuring all that out and figuring out the exact distance you need to move your head or roll under in order to avoid those punches. So yeah, just a kind of an example of what not to do, but not very helpful in terms of saving boxing, that's for sure. As for Jamaine Ortiz, I mean, at least there was some logic in what he was doing. You could figure out, okay, he's gonna stay on the outside, move around laterally around the perimeter of the ring, and try to, kind of peck at Lopez, which is what he did. So the only thing I could fault him on, because he came up on the short end according to the judges, was just to throw more once he did manage to get in range and at least land one punch on Ortiz. I mean on Lopez. But overall, yeah, man, like that was horrible. I hope I never have to see another fight where the fighter's just doing almost everything incorrectly. And yeah, I have a friend who, when her kids start making excuses at her about something, she asks them a question, why didn't you XYZ, and they start coming up with some convoluted made up story about this and that, she'll just say, oh, my head hurts, because it's like, just please stop talking, just stop talking, you're not making any sense anyways, you're just making it worse. And that's kind of how I felt watching this fight for 12 rounds. So there you have it. Tell me, I mean, we were the losers in this fight, I'll tell you that much if we watched it. But tell me what you think of Teofimo Lopez versus Jamaine Ortiz. Please put your comments in the comment section below, and thank you for listening.